Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Friday. I know Robbie and I always talk about this weather. It's still dark outside and foggy in DC.
What is happening?
What is happening? Do you feel a way about this weather?
I can't see anything.
We're literally walking through like just clouds, but it's going to be 70 next week. Did you see that?
Well, I'm excited about that, but I already can't drive, and now they're like asking me to drive through a wall of fog. It's
I know.
ridiculous.
And then you put your high beams on everybody. You're going to get people.
We're in trouble.
All right.
Coming up on Rising, President Trump has fired Kristi Noem from her position as Secretary of Homeland Security, and he has already picked a replacement.
Plus, Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez has ended his reelection campaign after pressure from all sides of the aisle admitting an affair with a former staffer.
The U.S. Senate race in Texas on the Republican side is heating up after President Trump put candidate Ken Paxton on notice for some comments he made. But first, Lindsey, what's in your lens?
Let's talk about it. So right now, the war involving the United States, Israel, and Iran is entering a dangerous new phase. And what stands out the most is not just the scale of the conflict, but the absence of an obvious exit. So Israel's military says it has already carried out roughly 2,500 strikes using more than 6,000 weapons. And its top general says the campaign is moving into the, quote, next phase. Donald Trump says the U.S. is, quote, far ahead of schedule in the war effort. But the question that matters the most to most of us is ahead of schedule toward what? Because at the moment, the objectives seem to be shifting. Some officials talk about preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Others talk about dismantling Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. Some openly talk about regime change. And now, after the killing of Iran's longtime supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, there's a new complication. There's a power vacuum. For decades, Khamenei ruled with an iron grip. But the force that helped maintain that control, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is now positioned to become the most powerful actor inside Iran. That raises the possibility that instead of weakening Iran's military influence, the war could actually strengthen the most hardline faction inside the country. At the same time, diplomacy appears nowhere in sight. Iran's foreign minister made that clear in a recent interview with Tom Yamis at NBC News.
Trump has not ruled out boots on the ground in Iran. Are you afraid of a U.S. invasion in your country?
No, we are waiting for them.
You are waiting for the U.S. military to invade the ground troops?
Yes, because we are confident that we can confront them, and that would be a big disaster for them.
So you're saying that Iran is ready and willing to take on the U.S. military if there were to be ground troops?
Well, we were ready for this war even more than the previous war.
See, that's not the language of a country looking for a ceasefire. It's the language of a conflict preparing to dig in. And the U.S. military sounds prepared to do the same. Here was Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth yesterday.
We've got no shortage of munitions. Our stockpiles of defensive and offensive weapons allow us to sustain this campaign as long as we need to.
The problem with wars of endurance is that they rarely stay contained. Already, the costs are spreading far beyond the battlefield. 6 American service members have been killed. More than 1,000 civilians in Iran have reportedly died, including children. One strike collapsed the roof of a school in southern Iran, killing 165 people, mostly girls between the ages of 7 and 12. And the ripple effects are reaching American households too. According to AAA, gas prices have been climbing since the start of the war. Mortgage rates are ticking up amid new inflation fears, and more than 11,000 flights, as you probably have seen across the Middle East, have been canceled completely, leaving thousands of Americans stranded still overseas. But the conflict is also expanding geographically. Thousands of miles away, the war reached Sri Lanka's southern coast after a U.S. submarine sank an Iranian warship in nearby waters, forcing local authorities to rescue survivors and treat them in a hospital. It's a stark example of how quickly a regional war can spill into global shipping routes and international waters. In Europe, governments are preparing for the possibility that the conflict could spread even further. After a drone strike hit a military base in Cyprus, European powers announced plans to mobilize defensive forces to protect the island, an EU member state sitting just miles from the Middle East. Even politically, here at home, the ground is shifting. President Trump once campaigned against what he calls endless wars. Now he's leading one without a clear timeline and without Congress placing meaningful limits on the mission. History shows that the hardest wars to end are the ones where the goals keep evolving and the stakes keep expanding. And right now, the conflict is starting to look less like a short military campaign and more like a long, unpredictable struggle with consequences stretching far beyond the Middle East.
All right, well, you have a fellow Panican here. I'm very concerned about this war. I completely agree with both the fact that the Trump administration has thrown out basically spaghetti at the wall to explain why we've done this in the first place. And if it's, 8 to 10 reasons and it's all of those things, that's fine, but that's not the way that it was presented to us. It was the Iranian people need their freedom, and then when that wasn't sufficient for people, it started to be that they were weeks away from nuclear enrichment and potentially even a nuclear weapon, and then it was that the leadership wasn't properly negotiating with the United States, that they weren't negotiating in good faith, and there's no clear plan for what success looks like based on what I've heard from administration officials. Is it total regime change? Is it decapitating the regime but leaving in somebody like a Delcy Rodriguez situation that they have in Venezuela? Is it the Iranian people rising up and taking over their government? We need to be clear about that and what the timeline is before we strike the country and get 6 American service members, probably more, killed.
Right. And I know that something that you and I talk about and even maybe disagree about is the fact that Congress has the power on paper to authorize wars, which they haven't done, as you point out, historically very often. But they do authorize the use of military force in past wars like Afghanistan, when we're convinced that there is an attack against al-Qaeda and then the world's Congress says yes, we move forward. And so those have been like preemptive conversations to big moves. The problem here is that there wasn't a preemptive conversation that any of Congress really thoroughly understood. And then the fact that we moved forward and made decisions, we made it for so many other countries too, because even I saw a leadership in the UAE sharing a message from a very wealthy businessman in the UAE that directly pointed his comments at President Trump yesterday, like, sir, we want to ask you on the heels of the Board of Peace, as somebody who moved forward and told us and sold us that you were here to do peace. We put billions of our dollars from our Middle Eastern countries toward this idea of peace in the Middle East. How then do you drag us into a war that we didn't ask for? And that's the question, not only that people on our soil are asking, because I know that it's happening from obvious Democratic leadership, but also leaders within MAGA and the Republican Party, but also around the world. And when we think about now that we've involved so many global entities in this, I just don't understand how you justify this unless there was an extreme and immediate threat.
Right. And the immediate threat, apparently, according to both Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Speaker Mike Johnson, Senator Tom Cotton, both of whom were in the Gang of Eight briefing, was that they were worried that Israel was going to strike Iran and that Iran would retaliate against the United States. Why on earth is Israel deciding the timing of our military action? We should be deciding that. We shouldn't be essentially blackmailed by what Israel wants to do. And after that Gang of Eight briefing, we had multiple senators also say that the administration actually didn't tell them that Iran was planning on preemptively striking Israel or the United States. And so that makes it even clearer what the final impetus was for us to decide to launch those strikes on early Saturday morning at around 3 a.m. It wasn't because Iran was going to strike. It wasn't because the U.S. Was trying to stave off their attacks. It was because of Israel.
Right. So I think the president and the administration has some messaging, but a lot of explaining to do, because we know Afghanistan went for 20 years, and I don't think anybody is looking for that to happen again.
No, absolutely not.
Kristi Noem is out at DHS, and why now and who's going to fill her shoes? We're going to talk about all of it next.